Hello and welcome to Higher Ed Live, the live weekly web show all about the world of higher education. I am your host, Seth Odell, coming to you live not from the Milliard at Southern New Hampshire University, but from my house in Manchester, New Hampshire. It's been a long day. Wasn't at SNHU. Was actually up in Woodstock with the fine folks at M. Stoner doing a webinar. Just got back, but I'm back at it again, round two, with tonight's Higher Ed Live episode, and it is a doozy. It is the website overhaul. It is talking about redoing your whole site, doing your CMS, changing everything, and doing it all the best top technology you can do. We're talking all about Webster University. They launched a new redesign. It's responsive design. They have a new CMS. The whole thing's gorgeous. We're going to show you pictures and not just talk to the man behind it at Webster, but the folks that teamed up with him to help make it happen. If you at your institution have ever been asked, we need to redo the website, or we need to find a better way to manage content, get those big picture questions, it's time to redo the site. This is that big conversation for you. We're going to be talking all about that today and really bringing in all the key players. So if you are at any point going to be going through a redesigned CMS change, a combination of the two, well, this is the show for you, because Patrick Powers not only got it launched, but launched it one day early. And one day early in the world of higher ed is like 1,000 days early anywhere else. And an industry that so often launches late. So this is an amazing achievement, and one that when I saw the site and Patrick told me that, I figured we got to get him on the show and the folks that help make it happen. And that's what we're talking about tonight. But first, before we dive in, as always, let's thank the sponsors that help make Higher Ed Live possible. We are sponsored by the fine folks at Integral. They're the creators of the Schools app on Facebook. It's a private Facebook community to boost enrollment and retention. They have a series of awesome blog posts going on lately, so hats off to them. One of my favorite new posts was how to welcome transfer students with social media. If you haven't checked it out, it's in the back channel, #HigherEdLive, and as always, use that for all of your questions, and we will get them answered. We are also sponsored by OmniUpdate, the leading web content management system CMS provider for higher education. The company's web CMS, which you will hear a little bit about tonight, it's called OU Campus. It's secure, scalable, with great tools, features, deployment flexibility, and an awesome user community. They have a really great webinar over on their site on how to create a culture of web content sharing and storytelling in higher ed. The link is in the back channel. And I say it every week, guys, they're the biggest in the industry for a reason. If you're thinking about getting a new CMS, don't look any farther before you consider OmniUpdate. And finally, we are sponsored by Scavenger. They're the Google-funded mobile game about going places, doing challenges, and earning points. One college professor recently harnessed the power of the mobile technology to teach freshmen about computers. How does Scavenger work in the classroom? You're going to have to click the link to find out, because that's just the way we do it. That's a little plug to the link, then you get all excited, you go read the link. That's just the way we do it. But it's a really good story. You're going to want to read it. I promise you that. And that is a thank you to our sponsors. So welcome back to the show again. Guys, this show is powered by not only Ustream, but also Google+. We are bringing on a whole series of folks via Hangouts. So without further ado, we're going to dive in. And just before we even start, I want to introduce you to all of the key players that are going to be talking with us tonight. It's going to be a really good conversation. And first, let's bring on the man himself from Webster. This is Patrick Powers. Welcome back to the program, Director of Digital Marketing Communications at Webster. Patrick, you've been on the show, I think last time was via your phone at a soccer practice. So at least tonight we got you in a nice, normal setup.
I'm sitting in my basement. I'm here in front of a desktop. I am not streaming over 4G, so you should hear me loud and clear. And there is no soccer practice to interrupt us.
Well, we are all grateful for that. And more importantly, thanks for kind of letting us expose on the project that you have just undertaken. It is a massive one in the higher ed web marketing world that pretty much doesn't get any bigger. And I'm really excited to be able to hear about it. So thanks to you for coming on the show.
Sure, thanks for letting us come on.
Yeah, and I also wanted to welcome to the show Susan Evans, who's Senior Strategist at M. Stoner, who's kind of been with Patrick all along the way in not only making this redesign work, but making it responsive and something that's really kind of cutting edge for where we are. So Susan, as well, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
And finally, someone who I can't believe I'm saying, I think it's his first time on the show, which is just unfair for all of us all the way around. The one and only Jeremy Rex, Sales Director at OmniUpdate. Longtime friend, Mr. California, good guy. So Jeremy, welcome finally to Higher Ed Live.
Thank you, Seth. It's great to be here. It's finally good to be invited on the show. I mean, it took a long enough, but we're glad to be here. We're so happy to be part with Patrick and with Susan as well, and then to partner with you as well.
Exactly. So I'm super excited to talk all about it. It's really great. So without further ado, Patrick, I'm going to bring you on. Let's set the stage for this conversation tonight. Where did this originate, and how was this idea brought to you? Because the thing we always hear in higher ed is that, we need to redo the site sentence. And that's kind of the most loaded sentence in the higher ed web marketing world. Is that what you heard, or was this a bigger conversation? Like, where did this whole thing begin?
Yeah, if you want to go all the way back to the very beginning, it probably starts before our president even arrived. When she interviewed, she had talked about the website that we had in place since 2006. We had a design created in 2003. It took about 3 years to implement. That design using a proprietary CMS that, very candidly, never worked for us, never really met our needs, never did what we wanted it to do. And we limped along and struggled with it for a long time. And once the new president came on board, it was clear that part of her vision was to overhaul the website to better serve our students. Getting that going was a little bit slow, in part because she was building her team at the highest level. She hired a chief communications officer who started in June of 2011, who basically turned to me and said, okay, president's in place, I'm in place, let's actually make this happen. And so we had to take it from there,
So walk me through that a little bit. I mean, that's, in a way, it's a loaded, scary thing to hear, but it's a great thing at the same time. I mean, you're talking about, like, let's go ahead and fix this and do this right. Like, what were your first steps before you even brought in people like Susan and Jeremy to make this happen? I mean, how do you even sit down and kind of wrap your head around what it is you're actually being asked to do?
Sure. I'll tell you what. It all started with what was a 5-page Word document. Very simple. What Barbara O'Malley, who's the Chief Communications Officer, and I drafted, went back and forth a dozen times, creating what we were calling Web Strategy Document. That was the jazzy name of it all. And it was really a very simple 4-page document outlining how are we going to use the web at Webster University, what do we want it to do, who are we trying to serve, answering those very basic strategic questions. And kind of once we got a handle on that, we took that document and started to build the project around it. Using that document is what led us to OmniUpdate. Using that document is what led us to mStoner. And they were really the partners that helped, take that document and really run with it and grow it into the project that it became.
So you have the document, you're looking at it, and you know that this isn't necessarily something that you're going to be able to do entirely alone, right? And you're saying, now we need to potentially look for outside partners. Whether it's starting with CMS or with design, walk me through, what does that process work? Did you guys, did you contact individual companies and ask them for proposals? Like, for someone who hasn't been through this process before, what does that process look like to kind of making those partnerships and bringing on a specific company to work with you?
Sure. I'll tell you kind of how we approached it and how I approached it, which, isn't the way that everyone's going to do it. But our philosophy from day one was the design is nice, but we were so displeased with the content management system that we had. That was going to be our starting point. We knew that once we selected a CMS, we could select a partner to design within the parameters of that CMS to make it work for us. But at the end of the day, Webster University is so dispersed. We have 100 campus locations around the world, and we have users around the world with varying degrees of abilities on the web. The core requirement was get a system that works, and that works in this environment. So, the very first thing that we did was we sent out, invitations for proposals to half a dozen CMS providers. To be honest, I'd never heard of OmniUpdates until I started watching this show, and so they were on the list of just people to call. And I'll be honest, even with Jeremy, they were not the front runner for a long time. Even though they gave us a presentation online. We sat through probably half a dozen of those, and even then they weren't the front runner. But it got down to inviting 2 of those people to campus. I'm sorry, 3 of those. One of which was OmniUpdate, and we're convinced, after that on-campus visit, that they were the right partners for us. So once we had OmniUpdate in place, we kind of did a little bit backwards. I know a lot of people will contact mStoner or a firm like mStoner and help them and use them to guide them through the entire process. But we went to mStoner and said, we've done all this research about CMS, and we know what we want to use because we know how we want to use it. Now help us actually make it happen.
And I think that's a really good time to let's bring Susan in for a little bit then too. So Susan, you guys get that phone call. How did things come? Tell me about your relationship with Webster a little bit. How did it start out once you guys come in? Like, what are the first things that you do when you come into a project like this and you and the university agree to work together? Like, where do you even start? Because again, this is a big conversation to have. So what are kind of the first things that you guys did with Webster to get the ball rolling and get this project moving?
Yeah, well, the first thing I think you do when you end up with a client like Patrick is that you smile really broadly and breathe a real sigh of relief. And I mean that with the most sincerity. I mean, one of the reasons that I think Patrick was able to move ahead the way he did and partner with On the Update early on was that he knew what he was doing, and he had a lot of experience, and he had a lot of credibility on his campus. And so that coming into the project for us was a huge win. So, the first thing we did essentially was start planning. Start thinking about what we needed to do to kick things off. And for us, that always starts with strategy. And in the way we operate, the only way you can do strategy is to really understand a place. And so we do a pretty extensive discovery phase where we read any materials that a university will share with us. We evaluate their website, we look at competitor sites, we come to campus and spend a couple of days and meet with as many people as they will put in a room with us. And Patrick was great. He had the coffee, the donuts, the chocolate, and a stream of people coming in for small group meetings for a couple of days. And it really gave us a chance to understand Webster. And the only way that you can really convey the story on a website about an institution is to understand it. So you got to be there, you got to let it seep into your consciousness, you got to be ready to really know as much as you can to produce fantastic creative and fantastic storytelling. So that's the way that we got started.
And so then, Jeremy, let me bring you on for a second too, and talk to me about once you guys go out to Webster and you guys meet with Patrick, you guys hit it off. It seems like the right partnership. Where does the CMS conversation go? Because the thing I find so interesting about this conversation is that all these parts are moving sort of at once, which is, I think, the real amazing challenge. So once you guys kind of, you guys are partnering with an institution like Webster, what happens next for CMS? I mean, what's the steps that are going on through your heads? What's the timeline? What are some of the things that you guys are working on your end?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the biggest thing that with Webster was the first part that Susan mentioned was organization has to be there. And what we found out from Webster is they knew what they wanted, and they knew where they wanted to go. And a lot of that was because of Patrick. And he talked about with his president and his boss. But that organization is so important to us so that we understand where we're going, and they know where we're going, and they all kind of sync up together. So, we've worked with M. Stoner on a bunch of different projects, and Webster is another one of them. And so we know what they're going to do. We know what they're going to expect. Technologically speaking, a CMS has to be really, really advanced. It has to be able to give the end users what they want to do. It has to be able to bring in a design, especially like you'll talk about a little bit later, a responsive design like M. Stoner does. And it has to be able to transform that design for an end user so the end user can easily update their information without breaking anything else. And so when we find out and we're able to use OU Campus that transforms and can take a great design like from M. Stoner and work with the organization part of how Patrick wants to run stuff with Webster University, we can output responsive design, we can output PDF, we can output all of these things. So as you said, all these things come together. We know what M. Stoner is going to do. We understood what Webster wanted, and we could do our work on the side so that, launch date could come together and all work together as one.
And when you start talking about launch date, the one of the things I want to do then is take a little bit of a leap ahead and show you guys the final product. I have some screenshots and walk through it a little bit. So, Patrick, since this is a little bit, this is your baby here. This is a big thing. I'm going to pull up the homepage and show a few different variations of it based on size. Why don't you introduce me to the homepage the same way I'm sure you probably did to folks that are on your campus when this launch came through. So walk me through the homepage. What is it like? Talk about the responsive design element and how does this work?
Okay. Am I going to see the screen?
You are not, so you just have to trust me.
You're going to have to trust that I know what the homepage looks like.
Yeah, well, just in general. I don't mean literally by graphics, but I mean tell me about what your goals were with the homepage as far as making it responsive, the way you wanted to display content, more just general than anything specific.
Sure. And I'll take a step back even. M. Stoner came up with 3 concept designs that we sent out for testing. I think we were odd in that we had 2 of those designs score very high for affinity. One of those designs was very content heavy. Very news focused, would rely heavily upon, some pretty heavy management of freshening up content on a regular basis. And so, but the design that we ultimately went with was a little bit different in that it was not as heavily focused on the news angle, and in part we chose it because of that reason. Every university has to know the realities of the situation where they exist. While that might have worked at a different institution, we weren't really staffed or equipped to manage that design, that first design concept. And so we went with the design that we did, which is what you see, for several reasons. One is that management issue, and two, we thought it did a great job of still feeling like higher education, but yet kind of breaking that mold of one big picture, news, events right below, kind of that standard, not even standard, but you see it a lot in higher education, some of the same design techniques. So we wanted to be a little bit different. But at the end of the day, it was really all about telling our brand story. From the first moment that you click onto webster.edu, we want you to know what we are about. And so if you look at the homepage and you look at the way content is stacked and organized, what you'll see breaking down the page are some of those highest level ideals about Webster University. St. Louis, global, military, international, online. And you see those distinctive characteristics across the top, what we call the 3 brand boxes. You see it in the global welcome, where the language rotates depending on how often you refresh it. If you click on it, it'll explain what language it is and all that stuff. And as you go down the page, it starts to deliver on those brand ideals. And so you'll start to see a little bit more granular, those proof points to back up, kind of that brand promise we're delivering from the very top of the page. And as you go down the page, it gets more and more granular until you're at the bottom and you're getting individual news releases and events going on around campus. So with that design in mind, delivering that brand promise in a digital sense, if you will, thinking about it in response, it was a little bit challenging, because yes, you want the design to look nice on all those devices, but you also want to be delivering content that meets those audiences using those devices. And so you'll start to see as those breakpoints get smaller for tablets and again for phones, we start to lose some of that highest level stuff. You lose the fast facts and you lose the Twitter feed. And on the smallest version, you even lose some of those highest ideal, those brand boxes, to get to some of that more granular information. So and so making decisions based on that, it's a different mindset in part. I remember having conversations with Doug Gopinski at M. Stoner and Susan on the phone talking about, okay, at this break point, what do we want to condense? What do we want to lose? How do we want to prioritize things?
Let me bring Susan in too, because I want to ask, this either to you or to her. At what point did you decide that you wanted to do this project responsive design? Like, was this something from the get-go, or was this something that M. Stoner played a role in bringing you that option and talking about it? It's obviously something that's becoming more and more popular, but you guys are still one of the first people to really execute it this well and execute it very well, I might add. When did that enter the conversation?
Well, I think Patrick was at the point, and his team was at the point where it was definitely something everyone was considering, and we were in the point with our clients where we were going to them and saying, all right, if we're going to do this, we should do it responsively, and here's why. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you relaunch a site and then just a few months later you realize that you made a mistake and should have really done it a different way. And so Patrick came in at a point where we could make those decisions because no work had been done to the contrary. So.
And let me just throw it out to you, Jeremy, actually, and talk about, just out of curiosity on my end, how does a CMS work with a responsive design as far as being able to display the content in a varying ways? I mean, just someone for me who's not that technically savvy, can any CMS do this? Is this something that Omni Update has been working to do? I mean, when people bring you responsive designs, what's the process? How is it handled on a CMS level?
Yeah, and that's really one of the reasons why OU Campus uses XSL3. And what that does is it ensures that the transformation is powerful and done the right way. so that you can transform a design and give everyone what they should be seeing based off different devices.
Uh-oh.
I think we got a frozen Jeremy here, so we will
Big Mike fail.
we'll hold on for 1 second, and let me then throw it back to you, Patrick, for a second while we get Jeremy caught back up, hopefully, and talk to me about. Oh, here's another question with responsive. Discussing responsive internally. How was that conversation? Because if this is something that web folks are still, I mean, as a marketer in higher ed, this is the conversation. Where is that at in the ivory tower in the corner office? Is this something that you had to introduce from 0 to 60? No one had ever heard of it before. And how did you go about not only getting buy-in for a new site, but for a form of technology that they may not have even really been familiar with in the first place?
Right. Yeah. We were going from zero knowledge to introducing the whole concept. We were still getting a question. Okay, well, are we going to have an app? Are we going to have an app with the new site? And so part of it was my conversations with the team. But this is where working with vendors can be a strong benefit. Is I would have conversations with Susan or with Doug at M. Stoner and say, hey, this is what we want to do. Can you help sell it, or can you help convey the importance or why we're choosing the direction that we're choosing? And Susan and her team would do a fantastic job and come in and explain from an outsider's perspective why this is important and why, yes, your team does know what they're talking about and and is there to support us and help make that sale. Mm-hmm. And I remember very distinctly, I think Susan has a slide in the presentation that she gave, explaining the timeline and evolution of mobile and how, moving forward, where things are going and where things are headed. And that's what speaks to administrators when you say, wait, you can do something that will put us ahead of the pack, that will prepare us, will essentially future-proof the website longer than any app would. Yes, sign me up. It's a kind of a no-brainer after that.
Well, and I got to say, Patrick, one thing I was going to say that hats off to you in all seriousness about this project is that it really seems like you guys invested in the future, both with responsive, really putting a CMS really up front as a major decision point, that this isn't something that's not going to be working in a year or two. I mean, a lot of schools, maybe 5 years and you turn around. I totally get that. I think it's a huge benefit to approach this as how can we build something that's going to be long-lasting, robust, and be with us for a long time. Susan, yeah.
I was just going to say, what the beauty of responsive is it's really incredible to see once you see the back end and how the OU system ties in with the design that Stoner came up with, really how simple it is in terms of how the CSS is structured, how the XML is structured. I can look at the code and I can read it and I can understand it, and I'm not really a code person. And I can look at it and say, that totally makes sense. I think the challenge for institutions is to think responsive ahead of time. And when I say that, I mean in terms of the content that they're producing, how they're going to present it, and making some of those tough decisions about the prioritization of content. Mm-hmm. Not just what gets a link on the homepage, but links are going to display differently and in different environments. And how do you want those to display? What content on this page gets the highest priority when we shrink down to a mobile? What looks best displayed huge on a desktop? Mm-hmm. And making some of those decisions was really the challenging part, I think.
And so at this point, we're still waiting for Jeremy to join back. A little bit of technical difficulties. I want to take a bit of a bigger picture for folks that are watching and provide some advice and guidance. So Susan, what is some advice that you can offer to maybe if someone else is watching and they get tasked with it's time to redesign the site, whether it's from your experience with Webster or in general, what are just a couple key things that anyone that's about to begin this process should be thinking about to get ready to make sure that they're doing things like Patrick said about making sure that the decisions they're making are going to last for a long time, that it's not something they're going to need to revisit right away, that they're making an investment in their site they're going to pay a return because it's going to be useful for so long. What are some key things you think that schools should be doing if they're really thinking about doing a full redesign? What are some things they should be thinking about right off the bat?
Yeah, and it's funny, just when you think there aren't enough decisions to make about technology, you've got to start making those decisions about responsive design, and I think Patrick covered a lot of that when he just answered some of the questions about content. But, essentially, even though there's a lot of support, I think, in senior leadership for the communication via digital, via web, there's still a lot of lack of understanding. And I think it always seems simpler than it actually is. And I still run into a lot of surprise when you tell someone that it takes 9 to 12 months to do this sort of launch. It's really easy to underestimate the complexity when you're not the person that has to do the work. And I think there's, Patrick mentioned simplicity. There's a lot of simplicity behind a lot of complexity. And there are a lot of decisions to be made. So, I mean, a couple of things that I would suggest is one, having an executive sponsor. The fact that Patrick had the attention of his president and the chief communications officer is huge. And throughout that project, you're going to need somebody to help you control scope. Make sure that you get the buy-in that you need from various stakeholders internally and externally to be able to move forward. So that's really important. I think strategy, again, is still really important. It's really easy just to go out there and start doing some stuff. But if you haven't thought about what your goals are, who your audiences are, what you're trying to accomplish, then anything seems like a reasonable option. And it's really hard to narrow your focus when anything is an obvious choice. And so I would say strategy, executive sponsorship, and partnership either within your own campus or with a partner. I mean, you don't have to hire a partner to do this kind of work, but it takes a village. So you need a lot of people to help you do it.
And Patrick, walk us through a little bit about what your timeline was. Since we're talking about timeline and how long some of these projects can take, what was the timeline for Webster's site? Because we already know it launched a day early, which alone is impressive.
Right. Yeah, so the original timeline was when we sat and drafted that original strategy document internally last August. The original timeline was March. Let's launch in March. And in part it took having some conversations about what was really involved and how big this project was, because we weren't just simply reskinning a site, we weren't just loading a CMS, we weren't just building a whole new, VM farm to house the site. We were doing all of those things, and understanding just the reality of the time frame that it would take to get that done. Now, in saying that, our boss still wanted, the president still wanted the site delivered on time, and so when I turned to M. Stoner and said, "I give you the most aggressive timetable that you can," and they did, to their credit, and we were able to stick with it, and I told them from day one, I said, give us the most aggressive timetable. I understand, that if this timetable gets blown up or gets delayed, it's on us. We took ownership of that, and tried to be as responsive as we could. When M. Stoner would deliver something and say, okay, we need feedback to move to the next step, I wanted to have people in place that, needed to have the buy-in, ready to go, ready to start making decisions so that we could keep it on track.
And so
that's really huge.
Yeah.
Being able to have the right people ready to talk about the right things at the right time. And then, Patrick, just the political capital that you had and the credibility that you had on campus to make people, so that people would realize, hey, we've got to decide. We can't wait till next semester. We
Right.
can't delay this until this committee meets again in 6 weeks. We've got to do this right now. So that was huge.
And a lot of the times, the stuff that people would get hung up on, for better or for worse, were the little things. The font color or the font choice or the photography selection, all the things that, once the site is up and live, we can change very simply, But to have those people in place to make those big decisions, around strategy and about scope, really was key. I told Susan I didn't realize how little web work I would do in a website relaunch. In part, it's securing buy-in, it's selling the message, it's communicating to the university community, and doing what you need to do to keep it on track.
Yeah, absolutely. So good news, guys. Jeremy is back with us, so we'll be jumping him back in the conversation in 2 seconds. Patrick, let me ask you kind of a loaded question. Is everything on the site the way you want it? And it's important because I want to know, like, do you have, because how do you separate personal opinion? I deal with this in video. I work in video all the time. Yeah. That I want something one way. How do you separate that? You're not building your site. You're building Webster's site. because you work with something so much. I always get emotionally involved in projects. I mean, it's got to be a challenge to be able to separate when you're saying this is what's best for Webster, and when you're like, all right, this is just what I really like, but this is where I'll concede on.
Yeah, this is you pulling in a conversation that we had earlier, right? Yeah, and I'll be candid about it. There are, I'll be very specific. There's one element of the site, and I'm not going to reveal what it isn't me. It doesn't speak to me. I don't get it. It doesn't work for me. But at the end of the day, I am one person, and if it doesn't work for me, so what? Because it works for the students. This particular element that I'm not a huge fan of tests really well with our students. It tested really well with our students at our locations around the world. And, it takes a little bit, you got to swallow your pride, and to say, yes, we're leading this project, but at the end of the day, it needs to serve our primary audience, which is students, And if this is what resonates with them and this is what they respond to, this is the direction we need to go in. And I'll tell you what, it is hard, because you see the stuff that, maybe you didn't care for, maybe you didn't like, or maybe you didn't want to do it that way exactly. But because that's the way your audience wants to use the web, that's the way you should do it.
So, Jeremy, I want to throw you back in here since we got you back after a little technical difficulties. The question I had thrown at you right when we disconnected is the one I want to kind of revisit for a second, which is a lot of folks talking about responsive web design. On the CMS side, what do they need to know? And for you guys in particular on the update, how are you able to work with a partner and a client like Webster when they come to you and say, we want to do this, and then they bring a design in, we're going to do responsive? How does that process work? Because again, on my end, on a CMS level, I don't have that knowledge. I'm just generally curious, what does that conversation look like?
Sure, and that's a perfect question that is happening more and more all the time because of what responsive design is. And so we handle responsive design. We have multiple doing responsive design. And so what we have to do with them is work with a great designer like M. Stoner, who understands that it's going to look different on different devices and on a desktop and other place. And so because we use XSL3, which transforms, it can take content and put it in the design that you want it to be on. And so a great CMS, what it does is it allows editors to edit content and not mess it up that it's going to look different in my iPhone or it's going to look different on your desktop. And it's so important that you have a CMS that does that can transform and can output mobile, can output PDF, can output all the different things that visitors to your website expect to get. And I think it's great that Patrick just mentioned that you're building a website. Who are you building it for? You're not building it, and he knows this, and he said it, you're not building it for Patrick Powers. You're not building it for the designer, M. Stoner. You're building it for those people that you're bringing to your website. And a good CMS allows you to update content for them in the ways they want to get it and has specific design elements for those people you're getting. And we were just at HigherEdWeb. I mean, that's what everybody's talking about. Making sure that who you're going after and what audience you're trying to connect with, from social media to a design to a CMS, and make it easy for them to get that content that you're pushing out.
So one of the things I'm really excited about in talking about this conversation tonight is the fact that we have so many key players kind of coming together. You have a CMS, you have a design company, you have the university in the middle. So Patrick, walk me through launch day, because this is important. You launched the new CMS the same day that you launched the new design. Now, as an outsider, I would just be like, well, just launch one day, one the next, because that's like a lot of things that could go wrong. Walk me through that day. Was this like the best day ever or the worst day ever? What are your lessons learned? What is the advice? I mean, that's a lot to come in and be like, well, here's my to-do list today. Like, just launch everything.
Yeah, just turn everything on. Yeah. Yeah. Just push go, right? And it all happens. That's exactly how it went. No, it was funny. Before this project, I wasn't a huge note taker in meetings, and but this project taught me I needed to write more stuff down. I started keeping a notebook, and I would write down tasks and to-dos. And the list of tasks and to-dos those last 3 or 4 days, was 2 pages long every day, and I'm checking things off. And okay, that happened. This person needs to do that. This person needs to do that. Leading up to launch day, there was so much involved, not just in terms of turning on OU, because the reality is we had been using OU for a whopping 2 weeks, building onto a sandbox. So we were comfortable in OU, or as comfortable as we were going to get, and we had seen the design, 6 months ago or 5 months ago, however long. So we were kind of comfortable with that. A large component of this project was working. A huge chunk of the work came out of our IT people, because not only were they, implementing OU from the technical side, but they were also building new servers and backups and performance load testing. They were doing all this stuff they had never done prior, and pulling it all together on that day was it was a little bit nerve-wracking. But this is where I can't give enough credit to our team and to working with OU and to working with M. Stoner. I felt that I probably could have picked up the phone at 2 in the morning and called Jeremy. Well, it's only midnight there, so he would have answered. But I could have done the same with Susan. I know I did it with Greg, the technical lead on the M. Stoner team. And hey, this isn't working, or this isn't in line with everything that we need to have in line, and it would get fixed, immediately. And I think that's a key part about choosing a partner. I think we kind of joke around, and Susan and I have inside jokes, and Jeremy and I have inside jokes, but I think part of it is that comfort with each other and knowing that everyone's going to do the job that they know how to do, and you trust them to do that. And really, and on my end, it was just keeping that list and making sure I could keep putting check marks.
So let's take a step back, since we've talked a lot about Webster. I want to bring Susan on next, and I'm going to ask all three this question though. So Patrick and Jeremy, just get ready. What's like your biggest advice for someone that is facing this same task? Redo the entire website. This is a massive task to give anybody. What's your advice to the person watching the show right now? Let's say they just got asked this today. Same thing. We need to redo everything. What do they need to know, at least do you think, on a design side? What's the thing they have to be thinking about right now if they're really going to try and do something as crazy as Webster did, which is redo everything and launch it all a day early and have it all look gorgeous? What do they need to know?
I think they need to understand what priorities are, and to really narrow down what's important. And if design is important, then that makes sense. I think responsive web design is certainly something that everybody who's considering this should think about doing. You're making a huge initial investment in terms of time and money, so why not make sure that you're at least future-proofing your site in a way that we all think will future-proof it. So that's certainly advice I would give. I think, I mentioned this already, but I think having executive sponsorship and having some understanding from your leadership that this is important, and if you're being asked to do this, then that's a good sign. I think an internal team needs to decide what they're not going to be able to accomplish during this kind of a web project, because it's really hard to do your day job and to take something like this on and still be able to balance everything. So that's advice I would give. I think I would mention strategy, because design is sort of misleading. I mean, there's a whole lot that goes into it before a designer is involved, and so I think certainly being able to represent the brand through a website, through digital communication is important, and that begins long before design takes place, long before anybody opens up Photoshop. So
great. And Jeremy, the same question to you. Someone's entering this process. You're about to pick up the phone, maybe call somebody like you guys. We got to redo the whole site, everything. What do they need to know? What do they need to be thinking about to tackle a project of this size?
I think Patrick touched on it. He had started working in OU campus months before. He had been working with the design 6 months before. When your site goes live, that's not when Omni Update either starts or when it ends. It is an ongoing support process. From working with your designer like M. Stoner from day one, to having a CMS that you feel like you can call at any time and support us, and that we can support you. We went on Webster for the first presentation. We also later down the road to talk to their IT team. We want to make sure that from day 1 to day 1,025 or however long that goes for, that the support is there, that Patrick can pick up the phone and ask questions, that you can call your designer and ask questions, and that it's an ongoing process, because things change, technology will change. We have a ticket system. We want to work with you. We want you to pick up the phone and talk to us. And you need that support from day minus 1,000 to day plus 1,000 across that whole gamut of what works. And that's what we're proud to do.
And I think that brings me to a great question for you, Patrick, which is both, yes, what's the advice for folks entering this? But also, let's start with that, your advice. In fact, we'll start right there. I don't want to go too far. You've just been through this process. The site is up. The biggest question of the whole night, probably. What's your advice? You've been through it to other folks that are going to venture this path with you.
Yeah, call Susan. No, I mean, and I say that jokingly, but it goes to a bigger point, for two reasons. I say call Susan. One, she's dead on about strategy. So much of the work on this project is putting that plan in place, knowing what you're doing, who you're doing it for, what do you want to accomplish, and how are you going to measure it at the end of the day to know that what you're doing has any value, or that you can demonstrate success. Having that strategy document in place has been invaluable. I refer to that document, I referred to it today, and I only envision that I'll continue to refer to it. And people have questions like, my department XYZ wants to do this on the web. And I say, okay, well, let's look at how, as a community, we have agreed what we're going to be doing on webster.edu. And that makes a lot of those decisions a little bit easier to make. So I can't overstate the need to have that strategy in place. And then the second piece of advice, when I say call Susan, it points to a larger theme of know where your resources are, where your strengths are, and where your weaknesses are, and who you can call for support. And Jeremy and Omni Update have been fantastic in that regard, as has M. Stoner, but also internally knowing the strengths of the people on your own team, and where you have gaps that you can fill with external people. But where, we knew what we wanted a CMS to do, so we didn't need anyone really to help us through that process. And so that was a strength of ours. And so knowing those strengths, those weaknesses, and where to turn to get the right resources to make it happen is key.
And Susan, let me just ask you, because I'm curious, how does M. Stoner's role work once a site is launched? At what point do you guys fade off into the sunset for another job well done? How does that work?
Well, we typically check in. We typically make sure that in the first few weeks after, we've gotten into the habit of meeting with our client Patrick every week, so it's gonna feel strange not to talk to him every week. So we probably will look for excuses to call him and look for reasons to say, hey, we're just checking in to make sure everything's going well. So, but it is the end of a project. I would kind of segue from that response into something that I should have mentioned earlier, and that is, if you're on a campus and you have this opportunity, take advantage of it. What you want to do is, at the end of the day, make sure that you have an incredibly strong internal team. Because it's the minute that website launches, the minute the project is over, you're in the mode of enhancement. You're in the mode of improvement. You're in the mode of, all of a sudden somebody needs something on the web and you have to provide it. And so you want to learn as much as you can from the external so that your team can take it from there.
I think that's very, very sound advice. And Jeremy, to throw to you just to hit a little bit on what you've talked about before. You obviously mentioned that for you guys, you're there through the whole process. So just for folks, they're looking to do a new website, they're looking to get a new CMS. Obviously, just give me real briefly, like you said, what kind of service do you guys provide for folks once there is a launch? You guys are installed. What's the relationship look like for a typical client?
We have a zero on hold phone policy. So we talk to Patrick or anybody on his team, daily, and we want them to send us tickets, and we want to deal with their emails. And so Susan mentioned it, it's enhancement. It is making it better. Things are changing. There's a joke that, all right, we just launched our website, then you start planning the next redesign. These are things that continually go, and you're trying to enhance it. And that's what we're here for. Technology is going to change. Needs are going to change. You're going to have something go, and you're going to look at the ROI on it, and you're saying, why don't we make these changes? And so that's what we're here to help you do.
And Patrick, let me bring it to you probably for the final question of tonight's show, which is just how How has the launch gone over, both internally with students? I mean, like, that's the big question. It's out there, you know, for the whole world to see. What has the response been like?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you know, the response has been overwhelmingly positive, you know, from students, from faculty, from staff, you know. Our community, I think, was starved for this. You know, they were ready for this, and they've been looking forward to it for a very long time. And so, you know, big university projects, you know, a lot of times people talk about them. This is, you know, big project is happening, this big project is happening. But when something actually gets delivered and rolled out to the public, there's a little bit of, oh, wow, they were serious, and this is pretty cool. And I think it makes people proud, you know, of the institution where they work. And, you know, I had someone, a developer on my team, you know, and she turned to me and she goes, now, finally, I can go out to the web community and be really proud and say, I work at Webster. Yeah, go check our site out. You know, and she didn't always feel that way, and I don't blame her. You know, so that, you know, you always get the comments of, you know, wait, where's this and where's this? And, you know, people adjusting to change. You know, but for the most part, we've heard nothing but good things. You know, what we weren't really fully prepared for was, you know, we rolled out on launch day. We launched with a little over 600, maybe 650 pages of content of what we were calling the top 2 tiers of information. You know, where 80% of our audience goes. But there was several, you know, offices and departments and smaller academic units that didn't come on board with the initial launch because we were on such an aggressive timetable, but that over the upcoming months will be rolling out. I was not prepared for just the maelstrom of calls being like, this is great, when is it my turn? You know, yeah. So I have a spreadsheet of about 125, you know, we're calling them sites, but they're really directories off the site, you know, of people that are, you know, lined up behind us, ready to get in and start playing.
Doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah,
no.
That's awesome, Patrick. And I think it's a great, you know, way to wrap things a little bit tonight. I mean, the big thing before I even thank you guys for coming on is my thought was this: I've talked about responsive design a little bit on the site before, and we've talked about different web projects. But we've never been able to bring on basically a team of people that did a complete overhaul. And we always hear about the overhaul. We're redoing the site. We finally got the buy-in from the top. We finally got the budget from the top. It's such a massive project. And not to take anything away from the talents of any of you, but I really hope it shows people that it's doable, that it's achievable by people, that higher ed can do this. We can launch really beautiful sites that function really well and deliver information well, and we can do it on a realistic timetable, and we can make everybody happy. You know, it's possible. People can do this. It's such a massive project that I feel that, you know, if someone is in your shoes the way you were on that first day, Patrick, when you get asked that question, you're in your head, I'm sure you're both excited and terrified. You know, the fact that this is here, it's possible, is, I think, a really awesome takeaway. I hope people have received that tonight in getting to hear from all you guys. So with that said, guys, this has been Higher Ed Live, and I would like to thank you, Patrick, Susan, and Jeremy, for all being on the show tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's great.
If you guys are thinking about doing a redesign of your own site, of course, both check out M. Stone and Omni Update and track down Patrick. He said he'd buy you lunch. With his eyes just there. But he'll at least answer your phone call and give you some further advice, I'm sure, because he's just a nice guy. So, guys, with that, again, I am Seth Odell. This is Higher Ed Live. We are back next week with an interview with the one and only Ron Bronson, and then we are going to be having a special surprise episode after that. That's how you plug things, special surprise. Now you're all wondering? You're going to have to wait and see. Until next time, this episode and all 100 of my previous episodes are archived at HigherEdLive.com. I hope you guys all have a fantastic evening. Take care.